Hey, what's up? What's up? What's up, man? What's up, process? Good morning. So I was gonna um make this video on the PC, and for whatever reason, I think I broke my charging thing, and like it just got me so mad for whatever ages. I felt so bad because I had been looking forward to this in the morning. I told myself when I wake up in the morning, I'm gonna jump on the PC and record the story so far because the PC video is 1080 is HD. Um, this one's on the Mac, like a 480p. So I figured I'm just going to enjoy uh, some good high quality recording, but that didn't happen. So I told myself there are two ways actually I could go about this. I could get mad, or I could be happy that I actually have two computers and then just do it. Just suck it up and do it, and then maybe get my thing to a repair guy during the day, and he'll help me sort it out. I had wanted to, oh yeah, and then I went on YouTube, and I was watching this really funny video uh about studying from home fails. Let me just search it for you. Home schooling fails by Peach. I think that's the company is called Peach or whatever they. This one was so funny. It's so funny. Homeschooling all day. Boom. It was this video just made my morning. And just I thought how like I'm trying to learn to code right now. I'm trying to get into this whole thing, and homeschooling sucks. It sucks for kids, it sucks for adults. But this video is so fun. I need to give it a thumbs up. I really enjoyed it. Anyway, that's not the point. I want to keep doing the story so far, and this is a series that um, I was doing on my, or like this is like revision for me, where I'm trying to write down and just remember what I did. So last time we hung out for about 2 hours. Um, Last week, I think at the end of the week, and I was trying to go through whatever I had learned, and we went to the story so far. So far, I have been able to do value types and operators, program structure, functions, data structures, objects, and arrays. And yesterday I did higher order functions, and it kicked my butt so hard. But today we're gonna repeat that during the course of the day, and then actually move on with the read along. I don't want to get done with this read along as soon as possible. I also thought this morning I might do a bunch of exercises. Who knows where that's gonna go? I'm actually getting ready to do some exercises, but let's go in here. And so I wrote some of my notes. Lesson one: value types and operators. Value: what's a JavaScript value? It's a bit stored into memory that can be called by JavaScript. And so what are some value types? So we have numbers, strings, booleans, empty value, and then I also found out that actually a value called an object. I added this later on. This is not in the book Eloquent JavaScript. Eloquent JavaScript actually just describes these three ones. And I think it makes a lot of sense, but this I might have gotten from a different tutorial. It is just to add it in here. And then in numbers, I learned about operators and symbol operators, unary operators, binary operators, logical operators, and ternary operators. And there's the add, minus, remainder, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, not equal to, not, logical and, logical or. I forget what this um, did. This might have been picked. The one that was on like, what was this about? I need to really remind myself because I saw when I was reading yesterday on higher order functions, they even had a program that utilized this type of operator, and it was just so interesting to me how I don't remember what that operator does. Then we talked about unary operators. These are not they are not symbols. It's like type of, and then so we have a binary operator and a ternary operator, and this is like a template literal, right? Then also logical operator. Come on, man, spelling. And then we looked at strings. They are written by enclosing their content in quotes. For example, this is my code. And then there's a boolean, which is true or false. And then there are empty values, which is null or undefined, which exist in the JavaScript. So lesson 2 was program structure, and this is where I was now. So it sounds to me like I wasn't even at I hadn't even gotten to get to functions yet. Oh, so we have quite the road to go. Yeah, so I was revising. Yeah, this is where I was. I've done just done so little in 2 hours in revision. Program structure, look at expressions. This is a fragment of code that produces a value. Actually, there's something I'm supposed to do so I don't get. All right. I need to set an alarm so that I can be sure to buy my Wi-Fi, my internet connection. Alright, so lesson 2 was program structure. We talked about expressions. So this is a fragment of code that produces a value. And then statements, this is a collection of expressions. And we talked that a collection could have a side effect and a return value. And I need to define those things. So let me find what someone else said. What is a side effect in JavaScript? Alright. A side effect is any application state. Any application state change that is observable outside the called function other than its return value. Right? So that sounds command V. Any application state change that is observable outside the called function. And then what is our return value? Alright, so what is meant by return value? A return is a value that a function returns to the calling script of function it completes the task. Return. So who else has values that a function returns when it is completed? The values that a function returns when it's completed, I think. Binding. So yes, so in lesson 2 we talked about expressions. Then we talked about statements. Then we talked about bindings. We were introduced to the idea of a variable, to the idea of a binding. And so this is a thing that catches and holds values. So think of it as a tentacle from an octopus. And I had this code in here. So this is the basics of capturing and releasing values from a binding. Alright, and then immediately after that we went and just explored the environment, the JavaScript environment, which is something I think that is just deserves its own session. of study and really just getting into the meat and potatoes. So he said that all right, so these are bindings that are part of the language standard that runs every time you open a browser or at any other JavaScript environment. So a JavaScript environment always has some bindings that are part of the language standard. This understanding is very important to understand the environment, because you now understand that JavaScript was written and designed by some people, some really smart people, and they already designed a set of rules of how that environment is going to operate. And so what you are coming to learn in this programming language, you're coming to learn how to talk to whatever they designed. And so as a JavaScript, I was just thinking about this as a JavaScript programmer, one of the few things that you start understanding or realizing, or a beginner programmer rather, like me, is that language was designed by people, and you want to start by learning the syntax and then how it works, and then really understanding the meat and potatoes of that language. And we'll get to that. So functions is a piece of program wrapped in a value. All right, so how to think about it is that there's a value, for example, like a number or a string. So if there's a program that is wrapped inside that string, that is called a function. And in higher order functions, um, what I was doing yesterday, and I got really like just messed up with that entire idea, is that a higher order function is a function that is called inside another function. It's like a function inside a function, and I need to go back and do that, but we'll get to that during the story so far, revisions and stuff like that. And what is a program? So our values, so we learn that values are bits that are held and released in a JavaScript environment. So strings, numbers, booleans, identified values. What is a program? It's a list of statements, but we know that statements are a bunch of expressions. And then so it's like value 1, this program. So this program wrapped inside this value, this is a function. So like this argument. So therefore it is value 1 arguments. This is the program that is wrapped in the value. It was a very good place for me to rationalize in my head what a function is, because I had a very hard time really starting to get to understand what functions are. But just even just through this revisions, I started just understanding what a function is: a piece of program that is wrapped inside a value. For example, prompt. This is a program that asks for user input. This is a function. So executing a function is called invoking, calling, or applying it, and it's done by using two brackets. So say prompt, then you call it, and then we go to the control flow, which is now where we're going to pick up from and just get into the meat and potatoes of the story so far. Okay, so control flow. So when your program contains more than one statement, the statements are executed as if they're a story from top to bottom. So we can say, all right, so yeah, top to bottom, I already captured that. And I want to really get into the habit of writing code also. So let the number be number, prompt, pick a number, console.log. Your number is a square root of string plus the binding, the number times the number, and then you'd output that. So it will ask you for a prompt, and you'd give a prompt, and the resultant will be that number. The function number converts the value to a number, right? So this is this is the function, the number, right? So here's a new thing that we've we've said, let this binding be a function. This is something they never defined up here. All the basics examples we were getting was let this binding be a string, be a what, like a number, be a boolean, whatever. But now here we can finally see that we've called a function. So let the number be number, and then there's a function that is trapped inside this value called number. Then console log your number. Da, 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 da. So here's a trivial schematic representation of the straight line control flow. Not all programs are straight. Yeah. So we got it. We got this. So we move on to conditional execution. Let's go with H3, conditional execution. And I wonder if there's a simpler way um, to jump between tabs in Chrome or Brave. Command option right. Command option right. Let's see. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna start using that from now on, just so that because I hate typing so much. All right. This is called um, also, not all programs are straight roads. We may, for example, want to create a branching road where the program takes a proper branch based on the situation at hand. This is called conditional execution. Conditional execution is created with the if keyword in JavaScript. So it's created with the if keyword in JavaScript. Let me actually just move this one to the next one. Created with the if keyword in JavaScript. Alright. So for example here, in the simple case, we want some code to be executed if and only if a certain condition holds. We might, for example, want to show the square of the input only if the input is actually a number. So let number be, again, that function prompt, pick a number. If not a number is none, the number. This is another function. Console.log your number is the square root of the number times the number. In hindsight, now that I've read a couple of chapters ahead and I'm coming back to look at this code, it makes a lot of sense now, because I can be able to pick the granular bits and parts of this code. So with this modification, if you enter parrot, no input is shown. The if keyword executes or skip a statement depending on the value of a Boolean expression. Alright, I think that's important. So the if keyword executes or skip a statement depending on the value of the Boolean expression. Let's say that the if keyword executes or skips a statement depending on the Boolean expression. So it's very important now to understand that this Boolean expression becomes very important when you're dealing with the if, because it's going to have to express a logic. You're going to have to express a logic. For example, is it true? If it's true, it holds. If it's false, it doesn't hold. All right. The not a number dot is none function is standard JavaScript function that returns true only if the argument given is none. All right, so here actually we are finding that this is a function. This is a function standard in JavaScript. This is what I learned yesterday. It's very interesting. I learned that JavaScript has inbuilt um, on MDN. These are like function properties that are built into JavaScript. Even higher order functions are here, whatever I was learning in. So some of these things I think are important to come later on and just take to understand. Like for example, by the way, these are unary operators. We only learned of type of. I didn't even learn of this one. So I think the more, like even the more time you spend with the language, you start finding other ways that you could express some of these things, and just use less words. All right. It's a function standard. The number function happens to return none if you give that string that doesn't represent a valid number. Thus, the condition translates to unless the number is not a number, do this. That's the boolean. So the statement after the if is wrapped in braces. In this example, the braces can be used to group any number of statements into a single statement called a block. You could also have omitted them in this case since they hold only a single statement. But to avoid having to think about whether they are needed, most JavaScript programmers use them in every wrapped statement like this. We'll mostly follow that convention in this book except the occasional one-liner. So this is the occasional one-liner. Right. So you often won't have code that executes when a condition holds true, but also code that handles the other case. This alternate path is represented by the second row in the diagram. You can use the else keyword together with the if. So if it's not obvious that you're just going to have one condition, so you're going to really have two, if and else. And both of them are logic that you need to write into it. So here, this is the first one, else console.log. Hey, why didn't you give me a number? So as a programmer, you want to think about these two conditions. The condition that will happen when you do this, and another condition. So that's the if else. And you can have a bunch of else's also. If you have more than two paths to choose from, you can chain multiple if else pairs together. Here's an example. Let num number, then prompt pick a number. If num is less than 10, then we're going to put to have a block here, console.log small. Close it. Else, if num it's interesting, where does this one leave this block? Anyway, else if num is more than less than 100, we have another block in here, console.log medium. Else console.log large. So let's think through this one. Maybe I might just go ahead and now start to write it. Let me move this one here. So let's think through this small piece of code. So you said let num be number, and then inside, so be this, let num this be this function number. Then here we have prompt pick a number. Okay, so let this num be this function, but if it's less than 10, let the console log give me small. Else, if less than 100, let it give me medium. Then this is else, it doesn't have any of this 10 or 100, so it means else if it's just not less than 10 or not less than 100, console.log large. And if you run that, it will ask you to give it a number. So let's try that. So they said let num, and he's described num as number, and in here he has a prompt, and that is a function wrapped in another function as a string. Say pick a number, and then I'm going to close it. Then we're going to say if so num is that's our binding is less than 10. All right, now that we have that, what are we going to do? We're going to have a brace. We're going to have a brace in here that describes what we're going to do. Console.log, give me a string, say small. All right, and then let's step out of it. Say else. Okay, yeah. So let's say else num is less than 100. What should we do? What should we do here? Let's ask it to console.log. What do you want it to console.log? Give us like a string called medium. All right. Else, what do you want else to do? Want else to say console.log I wonder else console.log large. We're going just to see how wrong I am. So what's my problem here? Missing semicolon. Okay, let's run it first before I knew I'm still breaking. Let me run this first. All right, let me compare now. What did I miss? So I didn't this. I need to close it at the end of the console log, at the end of the medium, at the end of the large. Let me try that first. Okay, small console log, small console log, medium, console log, large. Let's clear and run it. Okay, this is alright. So where else did my code break? Else. Alright, so I need to pass this inside a code block. Okay. Else command X command V. Immediately just start seeing how small things like this else if. So this is an else if. Interesting. Else if. Is let me pick 500. Gives me large. So what I've just found out is I will still have a lot to learn with syntax. That's okay. That's really okay. Um, let's clear. Let's run it again. Give it 2. Small. Let's clear. And that is cool. So what have I understood here? So if this is our first break of the control, then this else if is our second one, and then finally else is our third one. Always the arguments have to live inside this curly brace. Always make it live inside this curly brace. That's what I've learned. Okay, cool. Let's go back here and clear this. Right, go back and keep going. So the program will first check whether num is less than 10. If it is, it chooses that branch shows small. And it is done. If it isn't, it takes the else branch, which itself contains a second if. If the second condition less than 100 holds, that means the number is at least 10, but below 100, that's medium. If it doesn't, else branch is shown. Alright, so now I have understood if and else statement, and how can I write about that? Right, so you can have if else statements. Notion doesn't want to understand my thing. Right, cool. Where am I now? While and do loops. So in control flow, you want to understand first, but there's the if and else, if, else if, and else statements. And so you will have let me say one if statement. Let me bring this up. Statement else if statement, and then finally else statement. So it's the first, let me put it in bracket, the first argument, or first break of the chain, first control flow. First control, let me use those same ones, control flow. Second or third control flow, and then this should be the last control flow. So if you have a bunch of arguments, you could have if, else if, and then else. So it's not if else, it's else if. Else if. I think NB the arguments are always put inside the curly braces, and then here I can have this example. Command C, and then I can Command V here. So now when I'm looking at this code, this is JavaScript. So let num be equals to number, prompt to pick a number. If num is less than 10, console.log small. Look how cool notion is, just to learn programming. Console.log small, else if num is less than 100. See how we've broken out of this argument. Else if we put here our boolean, get into our brace, break out with finalize with a semicolon, break out of our brace, else get into our brace. I like that I've learned that. So now we go to 3 while and do loops. And I realized that I had a problem with this, but I went back and I was studying this. It would be fun to. I really wanted to do this yesterday. Okay, fine. So consider a program that outputs all 11 numbers from 0 to 12. One way to write this is as follows: console.log 0, 2, 4, 6, 8 to 12. That works, but the idea of writing a program is to make something less work, not more. If we need all even numbers less than 1000, this approach would be unworkable. What we need, hey, you good? You need anything from me? Alright, where was I? This is a form of control flow called a loop. What we need is a way to run a piece of code multiple times. This form of control flow is called a loop. Looping control flow allows us to go back to some point in the program where we were before and repeat it with our current program state. If we combine this with the binding that counts, we can do something like this. Let the number be 0 while, so this is a while loop, alright, while number is less than 12. So this is our boolean. What do you want it to do? Console log that number, and then another thing, want the number to be to iterate +2. And so let's think and walk through this logic, because I think this is one of the things that I missed the first time, and when I was watching a bunch of other videos about loops, it started making a little bit of sense to me. So let's talk about that. Here there is going to loop all these even numbers. Alright, so let's go to JSBin. So I think we said let number is defined number, this number is going to be 0. This is where we are starting from, and this is our binding, so we're going to put 0 in memory of 1. Okay, and then when you say while, this while tells JavaScript start loop, start looping, start iterating. Okay, right? So number be 0, close that, and then say while. When you say while, you want to create your boolean, your logic, your true or false. So number is less than 12. Okay, that's our logic. Number is less than 12. Okay, fine. Now that we have that logic, do we also close it, or do we close it? No, we don't. We jump into the arguments first. Okay, fine. So let's jump into the arguments. Let's make some arguments inside this code. So while number is equal to 12, I want you to, in my console.log, I want you to print number. Okay, and then I want you to say number is equals to what did I go wrong? Number plus 1. Okay, is that okay? Let's think about this loop, and we're just going to think about the basics of what we've just been thinking about. We have put in memory this number 0. Okay, fine. So if your memory array is like this, we have 0, we've designed here 0. Then we've said we're going to create a loop. Number is less than 12, so we already decided that we're going to use 12. No, but where do we decide that's going to be? So it's not plus 2, I think. Let's find that out. Yes, it's plus 2 because it's even. You understand? If it's plus 1, it's going to print 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's good. At least I can start to say that I've been thinking about it. So because I want to print all even numbers, it's going to plus 2. So it plus 2's in the first iteration, it will give me 2. Then it will loop and go back to 2. And then it will add 2, then give me 4. Then it will loop and go back to 4. And it will do that until it is less than 12. So let's run this. We're going to get 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Remember, it is less than 12. But if for whatever reason we had less than or equal to 12, and then we clear and run it, would get until 12. So the logic still works. Now this is how you create a loop. Remember, when you tell JavaScript while, it creates your loop. Alright, so let's log that in our notes. So while loop will iterate on whatever, man. Let me say while keyword tells JavaScript to start a loop, and let me go in here and copy this simple command C. So in this example, create a loop that shows, or let's say create an even a program that should, maybe you should say a program that shows even numbers from 0 to 12. This is basically what this is doing. We start by putting that number in our memory by creating a binding for the number and giving it value of 0, and then asking it's going to be less than 12, and then going to console log that number. Then this is the second argument that's going to be passed onto it. This is the iteration, and basically I think how you can now write this is you can put this in one statement, okay? But I think we'll get to that, and that's why I think when I was studying this, that's how loops are written, you know. So for let counter be 0, counter is this logic, then counter is counter plus 1 or counter plus 3 if you want to show those types of things. So A statement starting with the keyword while creates a loop. The word while is followed by an expression in parentheses and then a statement, much like if. The loop keeps entering that state as long as the expression produces a value that gives true when converted to Boolean. The number binding demonstrates the way a binding can track the progress of a program. Now this makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, so this number binding, it demonstrates how a binding can keep the state of a program. So when we say 0, this binding, and I think one thing now you start understanding with JavaScript is that it has all the numbers in the world. Okay, so when you say let's start with 0 to 1,000,000 and print this, it will probably print, but we don't want to do that. You know, just to let me find, let me use multiples of 5. That's very easy. Multiples of 3. Cool. Let me use multiples of 3 and let me clear. So let 0 be 0 and equals to, let's say 36, right? But I want you to print multiples of 3, okay? And then I want you to run it. Right, so 3, 6, 9. Cool. And I think now, can I make it do something else? I think we'll get there with the if. If, so if a while and a do loop. All right, cool. We'll get there. Cool. So happy that this is just kind of like opening up and making sense to me even after doing this for quite some time. So the number binding demonstrates the way a binding can track the progress of a program. Every time the loop repeats. All right. So my alarm went off. Stop, and I need to buy an internet connections. It's very smart to put an alarm on because this is just so much fun. Alright, so going to come here. Just take a moment of my time. Okay, that is done. Okay. Every time the loop repeats, the number gets the value that is 2 more than the previous value. At the beginning of every repetition, it is compared with the number 12 to decide whether the program's work is finished. As an example that actually does something useful, we can now write a program that calculates and shows the value of 2 raised to the 10th power. We use 2 bindings, one to keep track of our result and one to count how often we multiply this result by 2. The loop tests whether the second binding has reached 10 yet, and if not, updates both bindings. So let's think about this. So we've created one thing called result and another one called counter. Counter means going to start from 0 and result is 1. Cool. So while counter is less than 10, okay, result is going to be result times 2. Counter will be counter plus 1. Console.log result. Cool. So now let's think about this code. Let's think about this loop. And I think what the difference now here is in whatever they have outputted to the console. While in here, we ask the console to show us how it loops. So it showed us how looping works, right? This showed us how looping works. But what if we don't want to see all this loop? Because now we know that this happens. We can create another binding here and call it like a result. And we can ask it to do this and give us like the final result instead of it giving us what it's actually doing. I think that makes sense. Let me think through this code again. Let's go back here. Okay. So we're going to define a binding called result, and it will start from 1. And we're going to have a counter called 0. So let's think about this. So when we say while, it starts the program, but counter is going to be less than 10. So it's going to design 0 and 10. But result, inside this counter, we're going to run up a program called result, and result will be result times 2. But counter will be counter plus 1. So it's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 until 10. Very interesting. Very interesting. Let's think about this code more as we write it down and try to make sense of whatever we've just seen. So our code said let result equals to 1. So we've defined a binding called result, we've given it a value of 1. But we're also going to design let counter be 0. Okay. And then we're going to start our loop while counter is going to be less than 10. What do we want to actually run inside this program? We're going to say, so result equals result times 2. But counter, that's another argument, equals counter plus 2 so that it's 2, 2, 2. Is that it? And then console.log oh, where did we go wrong? Let's I thought I got it. Alright. Counter plus 1, console.log. So this has to be out. Let's try that. Let's try see if it works. If I actually I know it's, so let me just add plus 1. But let me okay, so let me try how it was, how my code was before. Okay. 32. So let's think about this code and what it does. Let's think about this as a problem. Let me go here plus 1. Counter plus 1. Okay. So how do you write a JavaScript? Okay, so let's make sense of this. Step 1, create a binding, call it binding called result. So call result and give it a value 1. Step 2, create a binding called counter and give it a value of 2. Step 3, start a loop. Step 4, set the loop logic to a loop when counter is less than 10. That is loop 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and then inside the loop, let result be result multiplied by 2 for every loop. Let the counter be counter plus 1 for every loop. Therefore, it will happen as thus. Result 1 plus 1 times 2. 1 times 2 result. So that will give us 2. And then it loops back to it will now be 2. 2 times 2 result, because it's adding, it's countering, result three until Is that so? Mhm. So it would be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, 2 times 2, then 4, 4 times 2, 8, 8 times 2, and then console.log display result. So I think every time it gets a result, it loops. With the result, it will be 2 times result to loop, and then will be 4 times result. It will do that how many times? It will counter that how many times. So not how many, it's how many times. Okay, I think it starts. So it counter. Let counter. So let the. So let me just say loops. The counter is loops. Let loopy be loopy. So loopy is my counter. You understand? I mean, like, it will loop how many times? So it will loop 9 times, actually 10 times, because yeah. All right. So the counter could also have set at 1 and checked for less than 10. But for reason we come apparent to chapter 4, it is a good idea to get used to counting from 0. So a do loop is a control structure similar to a while loop. It differs only in one point. A do loop always executes its body at least once and start testing whether it should stop only after the first execution. To reflect this test, the test appears after the body of the loop. So a do loop is a control. What does that mean though? Where does do loops even get to be shown? By the way, oh, so there's a while loop, do loops, and for loops. I need to go to the bathroom, so and I can't pause OBS. Oh man! So I'm gonna stop recording. This is part 1, and I'm coming back with part B after